Introduction to China, particular 20th century China. My goodness, what a diverse and unusual period of time. For most of China's history, it was ruled by emperors that had the noble blood flowing through their veins. So that have a whole dynasty of people and their sons and sons and sons, the Ming dynasty, and then the Yang dynasty, and the Han dynasty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The last great dynasty that was, royal, blue-blooded sorts of leaders was called the Qing dynasty, and it collapsed and fell apart in 1911. 1911, just before World War I on a world scale. So you can just put the Qing dynasty fails, and then this turbulent period follows, filled with these competing warlords. Again, people with noble blood who all want to be emperor, but nobody's winning. Things get really, really crazy. In the meantime, this is not happening in China, but this next thing is that 6 years later, the philosophies that had been written by these guys, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and put together in the Communist Manifesto, these ideas had taken such rich hold of the people's imaginations that they were starting to want to live it. And the first successful country to actually become communist was Russia. So in 1917, you have this Russian Revolution, bloody, awful. They overthrew their Tsar, and it leads to communism under the Russian leader named Lenin. And so people started to see that under Lenin, communism seemed to be working. Now, there were a lot of issues with it, but the idea gets going, and a lot of Chinese people get interested in it, okay? Now, finally, all these competing warlords are defeated and reunified and brought together again, so China becomes, again, a stable country, but not until 1928. That's a long time that they just fought and fought and fought. They were reunified under a leader named Chiang Kai-shek. He was a military guy. Chiang Kai-shek. And the Nationalist Party. Let's make China strong, let's industrialize it, let's catch up with the world a little bit. At about the same time, this obscure little boy from a poor province named Mao Zedong, he had actually he just grew up on a poor farm, and at age 14, he was betrothed to be married by his parents, and he didn't want to, and he rebelled, and he ran away from home, and ended up finishing school on his own, became educated, and then he went to Beijing and learned more, tried to improve himself. He became infatuated with the ideas of communism, in so much so that he started his own colony of communists, preached the ideas, and started to get quite a lot of followers. So it takes him 12 years, a decade, but from that time until this time, the Communist Party and Mao's power grows so much that the nationalists and Chiang Kai-shek feel really threatened. They root them out of the province where they are. They're very opposed to them. But then something happens to bring them together, okay? For the next little while, both the Nationalist Party and the Communists are going to work together because they have a common enemy, okay? 1937 to 1945. Think about what's happening on the world stage. The Nationalists and the Communists unite to defeat Japan as part of World War II. Oh yeah, World War II, huh? Yeah. But the second the World War II is over and Japan is defeated, the Nationalists and the Communists start disagreeing again about who's going to be in power. So from 1945 till 1949, there's a huge civil war. But Mao Zedong actually emerges as leader, and China officially becomes communist. Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalists flee. They actually go to the island of Taiwan. And it's interesting because the Chinese still claim Taiwan as part of their country, but Taiwan believes this is its own country. The U.S. recognizes Taiwan as an independent country. It's still quite controversial. So after Mao Zedong came into power, he decided it was finally time to start making the communist dream come true, okay? And at the same time, modernize the country, get it industrialized, figure out how to be successful on the world stage. So in these years, 1958 to 1961, he tried an experiment called the Great Leap Forward. Don't be deceived by this name, because it was actually a Great Leap backwards. And what he did was, one of the main communist ideals is that there's no private property. People don't own things, especially land. Okay, so he prohibited people to own land. People couldn't even own their own little farms. And he relocated a ton of people to these farming communes. So imagine you were a puppet show director, or you were a bicycle repairist, or you were a teacher, and all of a sudden you're sent out to work on a farm in a system where you have a place to sleep, you have food, and there's communist overseers making you work. But no matter how hard you work, it does not improve your life situation. You're still eating the same thing, you're still sleeping in the same place, you don't get any other possessions, your love life doesn't improve. The harder you work, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter, because your life does not improve. Now think about that. Why do you do schoolwork? Because you get something out of it, whether it's just points. Imagine if you got nothing for it. Would you do it? Well, it turns out that these little farming communes told their communist overseers that they were doing great and things were great, but they lied, okay? People are actually being very, very lazy and doing the bare minimum. And at the same time, this horrible famine came across China, and they say something like 17 million to 43 million people died, just something atrocious. He also started to outlaw all religion and old traditions. Because if people have a belief system, they're not going to want to listen to him. He knew that getting rid of their religion was a key step, and then brainwashing them into what became kind of the cult of Mao Zedong as he emerged as this great, almost godlike leader. The result, well, pain, suffering, the usual. Atrocious amounts of deaths, just awful. But that's not where he stopped. He then proposed this thing that became known as the Cultural Revolution, and it happened from 1966 to 1976, when Mao Zedong finally died, okay? So there's a video to watch that will give you these answers right in a row. You might need to stop the video to pick up the answers, but they're just little short answer things. And pay attention to that. You will be surprised who it is that actually does the persecuting and the torturing, and who they persecuted and tortured. And then we'll talk. All right, take care. See you later.